watching, it's usually the judges.
Oh,
I've seen Dick, I've seen Andy Cruz, I've seen Alex Walker. Brought into this specific retaliation. I think the nuisance language is strong enough.
So a brief opening statement now.
Have you seen some of my videos, Your Honor?
You can proceed.
Okay. Your Honor, first of all, I purchased the unit on Gold Street before Mr. Goldstein. The percentage of ownership of the building is being misrepresented. They're counting the basement, which has never been rented. So I am a owner of my unit and referring to a unit that's being rented. Now, what's on that sign is a public service, and it speaks right to my First Amendment rights. I'll bring your attention to the Supreme Court on the 19th, just said, unanimously reaffirms there is no hate speech to exception to the First Amendment. My only hate is corruption in the drug dealers, which we have the worst drug problem in the United States per the DEA. Now, what I'd also like to bring, I would like to go just briefly through the First Amendment, which is the basic concepts of freedom of expression and is the right of freedom of speech. So in other words, this is exactly what I'm doing, Your Honor. I have copies of the sign so you can see that. So you can see that I'm attacking corruption and drug dealers. Now, I'd also like to say, Mr. Cronin and I spoke on the phone. Now, I will tell this court I had 3 witnesses on that phone, and Mr. Cronin was speaking on a speakerphone.
All right, when
I'll
the
make it brief.
specifics, because I will give you an opportunity to be under oath.
I know,
and
but
provide that
I'll make it
information.
brief. But Mr. Cronin said that Steve Gordon extorted him. He and Mr. Goldstein didn't want to file a claim.
I'm going to object for the record. I don't mind him speaking this, but I just want to make it clear that I take exception to the content.
Well, I have witnesses, Your Honor, that'll testify to the fact that he said just that. And let's not forget, I'm in court right now, and have been in court for nearly 2 years with Aganos, Cruz, and Griner. I don't know if you know these individuals, because that may be a reason to recuse yourself, because Judge Walker was on there, Bill Shaheen, Judge Foley. Now, at the present time, I'm in court with these people. For 2 years, they can't get me to shut my signs off, where it would be there, and Judge Tucker and Judge Delker before him, opportunity to do so. But again, they didn't approach my First Amendment right. So, what I'm saying is, Mr. Goldstein and Mr. Cronin is being extorted. Extorted is Mr. Cronin's words, and that Steve Gordon called him out exactly. So again, I stand on the position of my First Amendment rights, and that what I'm doing is a service. Again, I owned the building before Mr. Goldstein did, my unit. I paid $1.1 million for my unit, which was quite a premium based on my signage. So that's what I bought. And what I've been having on this public service has gone on for about 6 or 7 years on that sign. It's only now with Steve Gordon, where I'm in court, who are calling and threatening the plaintiffs.
All right, thank you for that preliminary statement. I'll go ahead now and...
Mr. Goldstein, when did you buy the property?
I'm not sure of the date. It must be about 5 years ago.
5 years ago? No,
Yes.
it was like 7 years ago. It was August 15th, 2011. Okay. What did you pay for the building, Mr. Goldstein?
Objection, irrelevant.
I'll allow it, overruled. Go ahead.
I mean, I don't remember. This
You
is...
don't remember what you paid for the building?
No, I don't.
Well, let's. Do you think you paid more than $1.1 million?
Yes.
You did, but you don't remember how much you paid.
I don't.
You find that unusual?
Well, it's been 7 years and I own other property. It's not something I would keep in mind.
So you're in the real estate business, and you don't remember what you paid for your properties?
Well, not always. I mean, I have, but again, I've done a lot of buying and selling since then, so I don't remember specifically.
Well, you seem to be very accurate with the square footage of the building, the information of the building, the condo docs of the building, but you don't know how much you paid?
Relevance and argumentative.
The relevance is, Your Honor, that I paid a premium for this building and for the signage that I bought and for the ability to use those signs.
All right,
We'll agree with that. We'll stipulate to that fact.
okay. And it's been asked and answered, I think.
Okay, well, I reframed the question a couple times because I find it highly unusual. Okay. So, Mr. Goldstein, have we ever spoken?
No.
No. Would you recognize that I own my portion of the building well before you did?
Yes.
I did. So you're saying that these messages, when did you first notice them?
I mean, I don't remember, but I know in the beginning they were not on there.
Well, that's in Mr. Goldstein. I am telling you, let's see if we can exercise your memory. I've been using those signs for almost 10 years for those purposes. In fact, you suggested Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker was on that sign in 2010. Do you remember now?
No. If it had when I looked at the building, had those signs been on as they are now, I would have been reluctant to purchase my 2 units. So although they may have been on there, occasionally, not with the frequency they're on now, but I have no recall as to those messages being on at the time of purchase.
So you're saying you don't remember, and you have no recall of what was on those signs previous to your buying, even though I exercised your memory saying that Walker and Shaheen were on those signs.
Don't forget, before I bought the building, I also, I drove up South Willow Street many, many times.
But that's not the question. He's just not answering the questions.
Okay.
I forget and I don't remember.
All right, that may be an answer to the question. So you can, what I would suggest is try to make your questions a little shorter, and that way, you have a
I think
question.
they're very clear, Your Honor.
A
But go
direct
ahead.
question to him.
Before I bought the building, I frequently drove up South Willow Street and waited for the light, and I see those signs, and I don't remember at that time, even before I owned the building, that those messages were on the building. So as I said, but it would have certainly been something I would think about before purchase had I seen the messages as they are today.
Well, Mr. Goldstein, so you bought the building in August 15th of 11. Have you ever, other than just recently, ever called me or said anything to me, or in writing, that you had issues what was on those signs this whole 6 years?
No, I didn't want to have a conflict. I'm aware of what you've been doing to a certain point. I value even though we had never met. We seem to have a pleasant relationship. I would send you periodic bills regarding the maintenance of the building. You would pay them. Occasionally, a manager would call me if there were leaks in the roof or anything like that, and I'd take care of it. So there was, we had absolutely no issues at all. And as I said, I was reluctant to get involved in this, but I was forced to because of events that happened regarding Aspen Dental and the fact that I felt at that point it was having a disaster effect on my financial stake of the building.
So you're saying Aspen Dental is forcing your hand?
They're not forcing my hand, but it's certainly something I think about. I mean, I bought the building as an investor, and I want to make sure I have a tenant that has longevity and is happy.
But you had 6 years to question what was on those signs, and you didn't. And now suddenly that you do.
I think I've stated previously that I didn't remember initially these messages being on the sign, and it was only in the last couple of years that they became really the issue that they are today. So I don't know how else to state it. I did not know it was not an issue initially when I bought the building.
Okay. So when you were saying, what do I have on the signs? So your recall through these 6 years, what have I put on the signs?
Well, as I said in the beginning, it had things to do with your mortgage rates and about the kind of mortgages you offer and the kind of services that you offer, and that was absolutely fine. But when it started to zero in on individuals that were named, were just named, and accusations as to crimes you have accused them of committing, that just does not have anything to do with the building or the purpose of that sign.
In your opinion?
By the bylaws of the condominium association.
Well, let's go over that. So, you're saying that it's not necessarily accidental. For instance, you have said that many people have approached you and said they were offended by the sign. Who are they?
I mean, I've owned the building a while, and I do see my tenant, and I have asked the people who work for Aspen Dental. I've asked them, is this sign having have customers mention it? They say it has had an effect, and I actually have met people who are familiar with. Everybody knows that building because of the notoriety of the signs, and I have met people who in my opinion, universally agree that it is certainly a very distasteful thing to see that.
You didn't answer the question.
What?
The question is, who told you? Can you give me names?
No, I didn't. I
You
can't.
can't.
give you
Well, wait a
names.
minute. You just said many people, and you can't come up with one?
Objection asked and answered, argumentative.
Overruled, you can answer that question.
No, I mean these are not people that I personally know. They're either customers of Aspen or just people. I mean, occasionally I'll meet somebody and they'll ask me what I do, and they may say to me, well, what do you own anything in Manchester? And I might say, that I own this part of this building, and they'll say, oh, I know that building, and then they'll talk about the sign.
So people are just walking up to you and asking you what do you do? This is your testimony. Is that what you're saying? So
I'm
in other
saying-
words, the people that approach you are just strangers who happen to approach you and ask you what you do.
I have met people or spoken to people, and that's all I'm saying, who have found the sign objectionable.
Well, I'm sorry, you're under oath, and I'm asking you a direct
Well, I'm
question.
answering
Who
you
are those
truthfully.
people?
I'm answering you truthfully. I don't know their names.
All right, well, let's go over some names. Do you know Mr. Walker?
No,
Attorney Walker.
no.
Was this your testimony that Mr. Walker was on the sign? And you had a problem with Mr.?
I don't know these people on the side,
Oh.
but I know who they are.
Well, I'm going to keep reading off names and
Okay.
ask me if you know these people.
Okay.
Do you know Bill Shaheen?
No,
Do you know Dick Aganos?
no,
Andy Cruz?
no,
You sure you don't know Andy Cruz?
no. I know all of these people, but I've never met any of them.
So you've never spoken to any of these people?
No, I never have.
Okay. How about, have you heard that Steve Gordon was going to sue you if you didn't force me to take this information off the sign?
I originally, when this happened, and the case was.
Could you speak up, sir?
Originally, when the case of Dick Aganost and the other people involved it was filed in court, the suit, I received a letter from Shaheen and Gordon regarding the fact that I was head of the condominium and they wanted me to do something about it. At that point, I called John Cronin and I handed the letter over to him, and we discussed it.
When did you get this letter?
I don't remember, but very early on, in the suit.
So you know who these people are?
I'd have never met them, but I know who they are.
Oh, and they did communicate with you?
The attorney, the law firm communicated with me.
Well, was Steve Gordon is the principal of Steve Gordon, Shaheen and Gordon, isn't it?
He communicated in his capacity as an attorney representing that group of Aganost.
Representing, no. Actually, well, listen.
Who else, I don't know, or whoever he was representing of that group.
Did he threaten to sue you?
No.
Are you sure? What was in that letter?
I haven't read it recently, but it was going to involve me in this case, from whatever capacity it might be, and I did not want to be involved in this case, as personally or as the manager of the condominium association.
But
I wanted to stay completely out of it.
But you did get involved. We're here today because this was a form of extortion.
And
Objection, Your Honor, this is not relevant, and I'd ask you to have some control here, please.
Your Honor, this is relevant. I am saying to you, and Mr. Cronin I have witnesses that heard Mr. Cronin, his own words, saying that Mr. Goldstein and himself felt extorted by Steve Gordon.
Okay, Mr. Gill?
I'm going to be compelled to stand up if I don't have a standing objection.
I'm not going to leave a standing objection. If you have an objection to something, you can stand up, and just object and state your objection for the record, and I'll decide whether to sustain or overrule. You can continue. Please just ask the questions.
Your Honor, I would also ask this court that I do intend to question Mr. Cronin under oath.
Well, what's your response to that, Attorney Cronin?
Well, first I would ask him for an offer of proof, Your Honor, and then you have to determine whether it's relevant or not. Whether the motivations of Mr. Gordon and Mr. Anagnos have nothing to do with what the bylaws require of these signs. Absolutely nothing.
All right.
And we will stipulate for the record that Attorney Gordon contacted Martin's management expressing concerns about a possibility of suing them based on the content of those signs. We'll stipulate to that. So there's no more need for anything relative to that.
All right, you can be seated. Mr. Gill, what I'll do is, why don't you finish your questions of this witness? You can raise the issue about calling Attorney Cronin, and I will make a determination at that time.
Your Honor, I'll bring up another witness and to show you the relativeness of speaking to Mr. Cronin. Okay, so I'd like to continue. So, what is exactly, for instance, do you see drugs on the sign for me to fight corruption? Do you see me fighting corruption and fighting drugs in the state?
I mean, I see what you've said about it. That's the state of corruption. I've seen all of that.
So you've seen the website.
I haven't looked at the website itself, but I've seen what you put on the sign.
Would you be surprised to know that one of our last videos had over 4 million hits, and the 99.9% is positive?
Relevance, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Well, he's giving you, Your Honor, he's making his opinion on his own sense of morality.
I'm going to give you an opportunity to testify.
I'm speaking to his opinion. He brought up his opinion.
Right.
Your Honor, I have a First Amendment right, and what his opinion is shouldn't dictate what's on my sign.
And I'm giving you an opportunity to
Well,
argue that.
I'm trying to take that opportunity now. When did you rent to Aspen Dental?
Aspen Dental was a tenant when I purchased the building.
Yet Aspen Dental's never questioned to Mr. Bramante, complained about this, or never complained what's on the sign in all these years to mortgage specialists. Are you aware of that?
Hearsay.
I'm asking if he's aware of it.
I know nothing about this.
Mr. Gill, I've given you 3 exhibits that you were kind enough to give to me at the break that depict
Could you speak up?
Sure. How's this? Okay?
Better.
Better? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
At the break, you gave me 3 panels of photographs, which I've marked in sequence as exhibits, I believe, 7, 8, and 9. Do you see those before you, sir?
Yes, I do.
Focusing on the first exhibit, could you identify that by its exhibit number?
Exhibit 7,
Yes.
Alex Walker, extortion. There's a blank piece of it, seized. What it means is it was my accounts were seized. My accounts were seized by Judge Delker, who previously had the drug dealer case, Aganos, Cruz, and Griner, which is now with Tucker. So what I've been saying right along is they're working conjointly, which is why we're here now.
Let me ask you about the photographs. There's a photograph depicting, it says Walker Extortion, correct?
Yes.
Is that a panel of content that's on the message boards at Melody Mall?
Is that on a message board on the sign? There's a picture of it, so yes.
Are all of those pictures that are on those exhibits displayed from time to time at Melody Mall?
Excuse me, say that again?
Let me try and rephrase it. Are all of those photographs from time to time displayed on the reader boards at Melody Mall?
Well, I'm not saying it's Melody Mall. It's displayed on Mortgage Specialist. See, Melody Mall has a basement, so your analogy of the square footage is completely wrong. I bought those for those signage, which I have. So not on Melody Mall, on Mortgage Specialist.
Let me try it again, sir. There's a sign outside the building that we can refer to as Melody Mall. Would that be fair?
No.
Where are your signs located at the corner of Gold Street and South Willow Street?
On the building, on the, what is it, 300 Gold Street? On the building.
So if we
But
refer,
I'm not calling the building Melody Mall. We've got a basement and 2 units, rental units. I own one of them.
if we refer for purposes of this examination as the building, would you agree with me that's the building at the corner of Gold Street and South
I would
Willow
agree that
Street?
It's a building.
And would you agree with me that you have 2 signs on that building?
Yes.
Would you agree with me that the photographs displayed in those exhibits appear from time to time on the message boards on the building?
Yes.
And none of those photographs have anything to do with the business of mortgage specialists, do they?
I haven't had an ad for mortgage rates in, about 7 years.
So the
So
answer,
yes.
and could you define for me, other than the displays that we see on those panels, we clearly have Walker Extortion. Do you have some displays on those message boards about Mr. Anagnost?
Yes, I do, as being a drug dealer.
Do you
And
have?
also that I mentioned Hope
didn't-
Treatment Center. And in Hope Treatment Center, there's just an article that they had employees just announced that they're selling drugs and insurance fraud from the buildings. So yes, I have those pieces up on the signs.
And what about Mr. Cruz? Do you have postings about Mr. Cruz?
Yes, I do, Mr. Cruz and Auto Fair. The same gentleman, Mr. Cruz's partner, Sequoias, hired a hitman to murder me, which we have on audio. And since then, Mr. Sequoias resigned. And we have about 40 to 42 witnesses that have worked in and out of Auto Fair that said they're selling drugs. And one of which came into my office just last week, and I can have someone testify that, saying that Mr. Cruz in Anagos has a contract on my life presently.
Do you have displays on that message boards about Judge Delker from time to time?
Absolutely. And I have that.
I'm not asking you, I'm just asking you
Well, I'm
about the
asking to
displays.
explain, just like Mr. Goldstein had.
You can do that when you testify, sir. You're going to have all the time you
Well,
need
I'm
to
saying that
testify.
Judge Delker, who was the judge in the Anagos Cruise and Grinder, and who represented him was Bill Shaheen and Steve Gordon.
Your Honor, I'd ask if you could instruct the witness to be responsive to the question. He's going to have awkward time to provide a narrative.
Mr. Gill, so please listen to the question, take a breath, answer just the question, and then this additional information that you're providing, you will have an opportunity in your case to go ahead and
But I will
Provide
remind the
additional
judge that Mr.
testimony.
Goldstein ran on with his answers and so I'm only asking for the same opportunity.
I understand what you're saying. I instructed him, I listened to the objections from both sides. Please listen carefully to the question and just answer the question.
I'm going to ask you to try to answer yes and no to these questions.
Speak up again.
I'm going to try and ask you to answer yes or no to these questions. Do you have message displays on the board about Judge Anderson?
Yes, I do.
Do you have message displays about Judge Coughlin?
Yes, I do.
Do you have message displays about Attorney Bill Sheehan?
Excuse me, speak
Do you
up.
have message displays about Attorney Bill Sheehan?
Oh, Bill Shaheen, yes, I do.
Thank you. I have nothing further for Mr. Gill.
All right, so you may step.
My name is Greg Fedor, F-E-D-O-R.
Greg, you work with me on state of corruption.
That's correct.
Okay. You heard the testimony, just my testimony about the judges.
Yes.
Have you seen evidence that suggested the corruption with the judicial and these number of judges? Have you seen evidence that proves that they are corrupt?
100%, yes.
Objection, relevance, move to strike.
What is the relevance of this?
The relevance was what's on the sign and the necessary of why it's on the sign. I'm testifying that that sign's keeping me alive. So it is relative. The issues of the sign. Mr. Cronin just brought up what's on the sign. I'm having an explanation of why.
All right, I am going to overrule the objection. I'm going to allow some limited testimony here, particularly Attorney Cronin, because you do have this nuisance aspect, and I think the content of the sign is going to be relevant to the issue of whether it's a nuisance.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, as far as content, no issue, but we're going far afield of that in terms of relevance. Whether the signage is correct, assume everything that's on that sign about Mr. Zanignost and everyone else is correct.
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Federer, have you physically seen evidence of the corruption with Judge Delker?
Absolutely 100%, yes.
Did we send that to the Department of Justice in Washington?
That's correct.
Is it under investigation right now?
Yes.
Mr. Walker, they brought up extortion and murder. Do we have evidence and witnesses that will testify that that is true?
That is correct, yes.
And you have heard and seen these witnesses come forwards.
Yes.
You heard me just recently testify that we had a gentleman come into the office that works with Mr. Aganos. Is that true?
That is true.
Did he say that I have a contract on my life presently?
Hearsay.
Yes, he did.
Mr. Aganos is on that sign.
Hold on, Mr. Gill,
So you see drug dealers on the signs.
Yep.
Who are we representing on that sign as drug dealers?
Dick Aganos, Andy Cruz, and Auto Fair.
On that sign, Dick Aganos, have you seen evidence that says that he is a drug dealer?
Absolutely, 100% correct, yes.
Have we around 40 to 50 witnesses that worked for Mr. Aganos? Did they come forwards and say that he is a drug dealer?
Objection,
Yes.
hearsay.
the objection is sustained. That's hearsay.
Well, we actually have the witnesses, Your Honor, and it's part of court testimony. So it is with Judge Tucker and Delker now. So it's not hearsay, it's their statements.
The objection is sustained. It is hearsay.
When I get, for instance, phone calls, do you remember a phone call with Mr. Cronin that you were in a room?
Yes, I was.
Hearsay again.
The objection is sustained. It is hearsay.
No. We have three witnesses to the fact that Mr. Cronin saying he was being extorted by Steve Gordon. We can't ask that question? He was in the room, Your Honor. He is a witness to that room. This is not me saying it, I'm saying he is saying it. I'm verifying it was said.
I understand that, but it's an out-of-court statement that you're offering for the truth of the matter, and therefore it is the objection is sustained. You can proceed.
Do you believe that sign is saving my life?
Yes, I do.
George Sequoias, do you know who he is?
Yes, I'm familiar with who he is.
And what company does he work for?
He had recently resigned, but he worked for Auto Fair in Manchester.
You heard Mr. Goldstein saying sometimes you can't read our signs. Why is that?
He can't read our signs. They're pretty clear.
Meaning some of the parts have been
Oh,
blank.
yes. Yeah, at some points in time, the sign has had issues where certain portions of the sign were not
Why
readable.
is that?
There's been vandalism to the sign.
Have they shot arrows into the sign?
Yes,
Have they thrown paint on the sign?
absolutely.
Have they cut out fiber optics of the sign?
Yes,
Did we file police reports, for instance, with Police Chief Willard?
yes.
What did Willard do in response?
He had no response of any concern. I believe he laughed the matter off, and it wasn't, in his mind, a police matter.
Didn't he actually like the video of the destruction of the sign
Yes.
on Facebook? Isn't that right?
That's correct.
Regarding that phone call.
In regards to the phone call, I said it's clear that Attorney Cronin said that he,
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you believe that Mr. Goldstein and Mr. Cronin are being extorted by Mr. Shaheen?
Objection,
Yes.
relevance.
Overruled.
The relevant,
I overruled the objection, I heard the answer, sir.
yes, I believe that to be true.
didn't it make it clear that it was just recent that this extortion happened?
Yes, that is definitely correct. The two incidences, the phone call and this hearing, are in line with that, and I believe they are connected. And that's the reason I believe that Bill Shaheen and Gordon with Steve Gordon are extorting Martin's management and Attorney Cronin.
Is this the first time that Bill Shaheen and Steve Gordon extorted me?
No, they've attempted multiple times. In fact, on a sign issue in another location.
Was I a radio host?
Yes, you were.
What happened?
You were taken off the air because of Shaheen and Gordon and the conversations that they had with the management of the radio station.
These issues, for instance, we put drugs on the sign. Would you tell us the drug situation in the city of Manchester?
Yes, Manchester per capita has the worst heroin and cocaine problem in the country.
Do you remember that the DEA called it Ground Zero?
That's correct. They did they had a press conference in Manchester. They called it the 360 program, and in that press conference, they said Manchester was ground zero for the heroin and opiate addiction problem.
Was that a tractor trailer load of fentanyl?
Yes. Shortly thereafter, the DEA also had a buyback or a turn-in, and they had a tractor trailer full of fentanyl.
Do you remember who produced that evidence to the DEA days before?
You had actually given that evidence to the DEA.
So do you find that this sign is performing a customer service to the people?
Absolutely. It's very imperative that people are aware of what's going on in their city, in their state, and so that people can come forward and solve this problem.
You heard Mr. Goldstein saying how people were negative to the sign. We had one video just recently have 4.2 million views. Is that correct?
That is correct. In reference to the sign, I've actually stood outside of the sign multiple times and had people, to me, personally say, thank you. I appreciate what you're doing.
Well, in those 4.2 million views, how many negative comments have you found on those?
I can't recall many, if any.
Wasn't that particular video about Alex Walker, who's on the sign?
Yes, that is correct.
And it involved attempted murder and extortion?
Yes.
And it was Judge Delker who is the judge in the case. Is that so?
Yes, Judge Delker was on
I
that
know you're not
case.
very receptive to my relevancy objections, but I think we're going far afield here.
Well, I will allow it to the extent that Mr. Goldstein was able to testify to the negative input that he received, but Attorney,
I remind the judge, he brought up Delker.
Okay.
He brought up the judges.
Well, he brought up what was on the sign.
Right, and what's on the sign is Judge Delker. And then he asked me individually, is Judge Delker, is Judge Anderson on these signs?
I understand that, but I'm gonna sustain the objection to the extent I'll overrule the objection to the extent that you can ask him about the positive or negative feedback that he's received regarding.
That's what I'm
signs.
asking, Your Honor.
Exactly, and I allowed that, but with regard to asking, to going on and on about these
It's
other
not going on and
aside
on and on.
issues, I will sustain the objection. So please ask your questions briefly and move on.
Okay. So, for instance, with the videos, you see drug dealers on there. What's the percentage of the people that are for what we're doing?
99.99%.
Right. So in other words, have you ever had anybody come to you and object what we're doing on that sign?
Not to me personally, no.
Do we have a videotape and a witnesses that said that AutoFair and George Sequoias threw paint and destroyed our sign?
Yes, I spoke to that individual personally, said that.
Do you remember who George Sequoias is?
Yes, I do.
Why?
Well, he was the vice president of AutoFair, and there is an audio tape of a gentleman saying that George Sohoyas was hiring a person to murder you.
It's an hearsay.
Sustained.
Well, we have it on audio and 4 million people heard it.
Well, those 4 million people aren't here, so it's hearsay and the objection is sustained.
Is that information with George Sequoias with the Department of Justice in Washington?
Yes, it is.
Has a package of this evidence been given into Kathleen Conway, a representative of Mr. Trump?
Yes, it has been.
And I'm sorry, can you tell me what the relevance of that is?
Well, what I'm saying is his opinion. This is a case of extortion, still here. I am telling you that this is being investigated at a higher level. I am telling you that sign is saving my life. This guy Sequoias.
Okay, Mr. Gill, I understand what you're saying. What you're doing is you're making an argument. I understand that what you will argue in this case as a defense is that they're bringing this case because they're being extorted, and your defense is that you need it there because it's saving your life.
And I'm giving you the reason why, Your Honor.
And I think you have gone on some length on that. So
I'm
I'll just
making
ask you to.
Well, it's my life,
confine
Your Honor. I'd like to make it clear because if you violate my First Amendment right, it puts my life in jeopardy. So I need this court to understand that I'm standing on my First Amendment right, that it's keeping me alive. Your Honor.
I understand that, but the questions that need to be posed to him need to be relevant to the claims that are raised.
I think it is relevant.
By the plaintiffs here. So
If the
Mr.
plaintiffs are being extorted, it's very relevant.
I will just instruct Mr. Cronin, if there are relevance issues that you would like to raise, please raise them as the questions are asked. Go ahead, Attorney, Mr. Gill.
So when we talk about those judges, is it true that of the information that's on that sign, have you read an agreement that they offered me $50 million as a settlement for stop putting what's on my sign and for handing them releases?
Yes, that is correct.
Is Bill Shaheen on that?
Yes, most certainly is.
Is Steve Gordon on there?
Yes.
Is Alex Walker on there?
Yes.
Is the Department of Revenue on there?
Yes.
Is the IRS on there?
Yes.
Is the Banking Commission on there?
Yes.
And is this agreement signed?
Yes, it was.
It is signed. So for $50 million.
That's what it said.
Thank you, Your Honor. I still would like to question Mr. Cronin.
Let me ask Attorney Cronin, do you have any questions for this
I have
witness?
no questions.
All right, you may step down, sir. All right.
I'd like to.
And what is the basis for your request to question
Well,
him?
I'm telling you in this court that I spoke to Mr. Cronin, and he said he was being extorted by Steve Gordon, and so was Mr. Goldstein. So in other words, it's direct testimony. You're saying hearsay? Let's have Mr. Cronin say it. Your question here, now listen, I have witnesses, so I want Mr. Cronin, because what Mr. Goldstein's saying is that a year and a half ago, first of all, I don't believe that. I believe it was just recently. Yeah, that's what Mr. Cronin said. So it questions that testimony. But if the question is of extortion, and we're dealing with hearsay, Mr. Cronin keeps referring to hearsay, we don't have to have any hearsay. We can have Mr. Cronin testify to what he told me, in front of other, then we can have other witnesses there.
Attorney Cronin, what's your response to the request to have you testify?
This is pretty easy to resolve, Your Honor. For the purposes of our complaint.
Could you speak up, please?
For the purposes of our complaint in this proceeding,
Yes.
although I object to the characterization of extortion, there is no dispute here that Attorney Gordon contacted our office and suggested that the continued maintenance of those signs could put the association and Mr. Goldstein in financial jeopardy, and they could possibly be sued. Extortion's Mr. Gill's ward.
I understand
So
that.
we will stipulate to that. And for the purposes of this proceeding, whether we were extorted, whether we were threatened, whether we were served with a complaint, has nothing to do with Mr. Goldstein's and Martin's management's rights. So you can assume, arguendo, I'm not conceding it,
I understand.
that we brought this action based on a threat, based on a complaint, or whatever you want. It doesn't matter. So there's no need for me to testify.
Okay.
I object, Your Honor. I think it is. I think he's questioned the reliability of that. I think he didn't also say when he was extorted. And it was just recently. Mr. Goldstein said it was a letter a year and a half ago. So-
Hold on a second. Is that letter available?
It could be made available to the court, Your Honor, and it will show, by offer of proof.
Mr. Cronin under oath that in fact that there's been follow-up phone calls. Not just an existence of a letter a year and a half ago, which they didn't act on for approximately a year and 4 months. So again, it refers to the extortion piece of this.
All right, Mr. Gill, I'm going to deny your request. I don't think that counsel is a necessary witness in this case. I will, for the purposes of this case, recognize that there was a letter, and I will consider that in terms of what the motivations of the parties are here. So your request is denied.
Not just a letter, Your Honor. I want it clear that there hasn't been phone calls and threatening phone calls recently. Could you ask Mr. Cronin this, because this is part of the testimony?
I can assume, sir, that they may be having communications with one another